Aloha and welcome to today's virtual panel, Experiencing Imposter Syndrome. So my name is Kristen Connors and I'm from Graduate Division. I'll be your moderator and running tech support behind the scenes. And to get things started today, I would like to draw your attention to our land acknowledgement that you should be seeing. So our land acknowledgement reads that we would like to acknowledge the Aina on which we gather, recognizing Hawaii as an indigenous space whose original people are today identified as Native Hawaiians. The University of Hawaii at Manoa is physically located in the Ahupua'a of Waikiki, in the Moku of Kona, on the Mokupuni of Oahu, in the Pai'aina of Hawaii. We are grateful and privileged for the opportunity to honor those who came before us and their knowledge systems that shaped Hawaii in sustainable ways, allowing us to enjoy these gifts today. Let us collectively engage in the kuleana of becoming a Native Hawaiian place of learning, grounded in Aloha Aina. Okay. So thank you for letting me share that. It's very important for us to make time to give a land acknowledgement, so mahalo. So today we're tackling a big topic. We're talking about imposter syndrome. And so when we say imposter syndrome, what we're talking about is that experience of doubting your competency, abilities, or value. And it can manifest sometimes by thoughts that you're a fraud or phony, despite any previous successes or achievements. And so to share in the discussion on the topic, we're joined today by two current graduate students and an associate professor at UH Manoa. You'll hear about some of their experiences with imposter syndrome and how they recognize when it's happening and how they keep moving forward. During the next hour, we aim to create a space where you may be able to relate and recognize that you are not alone in experiencing imposter syndrome. And we hope that you can apply what you hear to help you chart your own individual inquiry of what you are experiencing and how to approach it. We are not in any way prescribing answers or solutions. That is an individual journey. After hearing from the panel, we hope to use any remaining time for our open Q&A. So at this time, I'd now like to invite our panelists to please introduce themselves. Dr. Lesher, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. I am a professor in the economics department. I'm originally from the Bay Area, California, but then I came here after getting my PhD from UC Davis. I came here in 2017, so I've now been here for 5+ years, going on into my 6th now.
Thank you. Maya?
Hello, Maya Ward. I'm a PhD candidate, also from the Department of Economics. I also serve as GSO, the Graduate Student Organization Treasurer. And I'm also in my 6th year here on Hawaii, originally from Maryland, outside of Washington, D.C.
Thank you. And last but not least, Clarice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Clarice Tandoko. I am a 2nd-year MA student in the Department of Sociology. Before starting the program here, I was in Singapore. I grew up and lived there, but I was born in Indonesia. So yeah, I'm very happy to talk with everyone today. Thank you.
Mahalo. So appreciate our panelists sharing a little bit about themselves so you have some background of who you're hearing today. So now that we know who's going to be talking, let's start off with our first question, which is, in what situations do you feel imposter syndrome and why? Clarice, why don't we hear from you first?
Okay, what a privilege to start first. But yeah, so I think in recent times, I've really been feeling it when I apply for things. I think one of the key differences in terms of the educational experience is that here there are a lot more opportunities, like there are open calls for papers, for workshops, and for, I don't know, like a whole bunch of things that I think I didn't exactly have in Singapore, or it wasn't very widely publicized. And so I'm finding myself wanting to apply for all of these things. But when I do start the application, like open it, sometimes it kicks in. Like I start questioning, like, oh, am I even ready for it? Like being a master's student as well, I think there are a lot of doubts as to, like, am I at that stage where I'm ready to present yet? So that's I think the instances where I actually feel it, the imposter syndrome kind of come up the most these days. Yeah.
Thank you, Maya. What about you? What are the situations you feel that imposter syndrome creep in, and why do you feel that way?
Yeah, so I also agree with applications for things. Right now, I'm applying for jobs. And so what Claris talks about with, feeling, are you ready? Do I know enough? They're asking for, they lay out all the qualifications that they want. And of course, I can nitpick and find how I'm not qualified for any of them. But, I still need to apply for something. So that's my, like, an immediate thing. But also when I'm trying to write journal articles or dissertation chapters, or doing presentations on, like, a new research project, I yeah, I feel like I have a block against especially writing papers, just because I feel like I'm, I watch these, professors and other scholars present their work. Like, am I really supposed to be, go do that too? Am I really at that level and everything? And so I think that's, right now I'm finishing my dissertation, and so it's really hard to just start on that last chapter. I feel like, should I even be doing this?
Thank you. Dr. Lusher, we're interested in hearing from you because you're past the application phase. And
I remember
so,
having the same feeling too, though. Yeah, applications were not fun, and kind of, yeah, those thoughts creep in where you're doubting, like, should I even apply for this job? Because do I have any chance? Anyways, yeah, luckily I'm past that phase. For me, but it's funny, like, despite having experienced it for maybe longer than the other two panelists, it still manifests, right? It still is there. I think it's just a human nature thing, for some people. For me, I still professionally, I still experience it whenever I'm in talks, conferences, or seminars. So oftentimes there's a presenter presenting something and I don't know what they're talking about. And then, or maybe I understand a little bit, and then people in the audience start asking questions, and then I don't understand the question, but then the speaker understands the question, answers, they have a back and forth, and I'm just like, what are these people talking about? And I still experience that even as a professor, as someone who's supposed to be a relative expert in the room. Even then, I'm still just like, man, I don't understand more than half of conversations that are going on during talks sometimes. And so that's kind of where I still experience it nowadays. Now I've kind of gotten used to it. I've lived with it, but that's professionally where I experience it. But also I'd say, like, personal life too, I definitely feel it. I'm the type of person where, I have friends, I have family that I think are amazing people, and I kind of look at what they've done with their lives and the amazing things that they're doing. And I'm just kind of like, man, like, I could be doing, like, why am I not doing that? Should I be doing that? How is this person related to me? Or why is this person my friend, when they're such amazing people? So I even kind of feel like that sometimes with these personal or familial connections that I have.
right. And I think especially, I know when we're prepping for the panel, we were talking about how social media really feeds into that. So there's just even more variables now that are complicating it. But it's interesting because for each of you, you did share scenarios that involve times when we're required to put ourselves out there as experts, or that we're asked to highlight our best attributes and achievements. So it's kind of interesting that that's the times that it kind of creeps into our lives. So when you do feel imposter syndrome, I guess the next question is, how do you recognize when it's manifesting in your life versus it being something else? Maya, what would your response to this be?
So for me, sometimes it's hard to identify, like, yes, this is oh, immediately I feel inadequate and, in this talk, and like somebody's asking me a question about my research and I have no idea what they're talking about. And immediately go to imposter syndrome. But for me, it starts with identifying how I'm feeling, which, is often a broader emotion like anxiety or overwhelmed or fearful, and like I said, feeling inadequate, and then going a little excuse me, and then going a little bit deeper into, what is making me anxious, how am I feeling inadequate, and if it's about something that I've supposedly trained for. So you mentioned, like, being put on the spot as an expert. If it's something that I'm, supposed to be an expert or relative expert on, and I, am like feeling like I don't feel like I know everything, then so it's emotional and then situational for me. Connecting those two, is how, yeah, that's how I feel it. And one specific thing is like, if I feel that, everyone else in my field is, or all of my colleagues, all of the other students are front of me, if I'm using those like all, always, never, those broad words that like are sort of all encompassing, then that's the anxiety talking. Like, okay, everybody can't be, one thing. Like, statistically, at least half the people, there has to be an average. So half the people have to be less smart than others and everything. So yeah, those are some of the clues that I.
Got it. And Dr. Lusher, what are some of the cues that help you to clue into that, oh, this is imposter syndrome going on right now?
Yeah, for me, it's like I've been fortunate enough to get to a point where I feel like I can identify it fairly quickly. And for me, I think something Maya hinted at as well. It's definitely an emotional response, right? This emotional leading to a physiological response, or I'm maybe sweating a little bit, my heart is pounding a little bit, and I start thinking a lot. You could call it overthinking. I'm thinking like, oh, like this, that, these thoughts. And then as I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, wait, I'm having these running chain of thoughts, probably because my heart is pounding, and probably because, well, yeah, wait, and then it's, work backwards from there. Hey, this is imposter syndrome, or this is at least a sense of like, nervousness, like, what am I doing here, kind of thing, so it, for me, it's definitely sort of like physiological, emotional. And once I'm able to, and once I'm able to identify that, then, some tips and tricks to try to like, okay, snap out of it, so to speak, or deal with it. Yeah.
Iris, is it the same experience for you, or how do you realize that this is the imposter syndrome that I'm feeling versus something else?
Yeah, I think I definitely can relate to the emotional and physiological kind of reaction to it. But I think if I could add something to that, it's also like a contradiction almost, like, for example, like if you have to write a paper, or if you have to submit an application, I think a part of you knows that you have done the work, like you've done the literature review, you've read all this stuff. It's not like you've spent the last few days slacking. And it's kind of like that knowledge that you've done something, but somehow you can't put words to paper. And sometimes it's almost like an out of body experience where you're like looking at it as like, I know what to write, but it's not coming out. So it's almost like, I think people talk about it in terms of the writer's block, but it's a very specific kind of writer's block where but you don't know how to put it down in paper. And that I think the contradiction is what kind of helps me sometimes to like notice it and then snap out of it, as Lester said. But it's kind of to take a moment and realize that, hey, there's something weird here. If you are prepared, why are you not able to go ahead? Yeah, I think that's what I might add to the conversation. Yeah.
So I'll follow up that question to our panelists with another one. Sorry, I know we have a third one to go into, but still on this topic of recognizing when imposter syndrome is manifesting. So would you all say that in addition to an emotional response, sometimes you just freeze, you just get paralyzed. And it's that all of a sudden you're not taking action. That's kind of a clue that why am I doubting myself? Like Clara said, right? I did the work, I have the degree, I've been published, but now I'm not taking action. Well, what would you say to that?
Yeah, for me, that's definitely like, I experience when I get anxious, that's one of the ways that my anxiety manifests, is this sort of paralyzation and, you know, knowing that I need to act, but like right now when I need to work on my dissertation chapter and I've been putting it off all week because I'm like intimidated by it and by the tasks ahead, when like Clara said, I've done all the literature reviews, I know all of the things that I have to put down, but it's like, well, am I like when I formulate, you know, the argument, is it going to be good enough? When like, you know, I've done the analysis, I've done the reviews, my advisor says it's good, you know, and yet I'm still like frozen and afraid of it.
Yeah, I could add a quick one. You know, there's kind of like damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of sense to it. It's like, okay, I'm frozen, I'm not acting because I'm too afraid, or I know I'm capable, but I'm not acting on it because my emotions are freezing me. You know, and then I always say, okay, well, what else could you do? As an economist, I can help us say, what's the opportunity cost, right? What's the counterfactual, right? Well, just do it. And you do, and what's your fear? You're going to do it terribly, or you're going to produce a crappy job or a crappy dissertation, whatever it is. And then I try to find a way to convince myself, look, that alternative, the worst thing that could come out of the alternative is still better than not doing it and not trying and not getting it done. You know, that's kind of the mindset I take. It's like, well, what's the worst that could happen if I do snap myself out of this, you know, state of being frozen?
I think that leads perfectly into our third question, which is what have you done to accept what you're experiencing and navigate to the next step? So Dr. Lusher, you're talking about how you kind of like take a logical approach sometimes, and it's, well, you either go for it, and if it's horrible, or if I don't, then I'm missing this opportunity. So Dr. Lusher, do you want to talk more about what are the other steps you take to try to navigate past what you're experiencing?
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, there's a story that I often share with my graduate students. I probably shared it with Maya when I taught her class, which is a story that I had when I was a graduate student, probably second or third year. And I remember stumbling upon some data. It was kind of the first time I ever got to some interesting data. I analyzed it and I found something pretty cool. And I was like, oh, wow, look at this cool thing that I found. Can this be my first paper? Could this be a dissertation chapter? Could I make something of this? And I did all the same steps that someone who's suffering from imposter syndrome does, which is talk yourself out of being able to do it, right? So I ended up not writing that paper because I thought I wasn't capable because of whatever. And within months, very, very quickly, I saw someone publish a paper using that exact same data, basically the exact same results, et cetera. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe I dropped the ball on this. I could have written that paper, you know. And so that, for me, I remember that was a very strong turning point when I said, okay, you know, exactly what I was saying earlier. The consequences of not trying are far worse than, you know, trying and failing, as corny as that might be. And so that's what I tell myself when I am finding myself stuck in a frozen state of being able to try to pursue what it is I want to do. Now, of course, there are other situations where I still, so when it comes to productivity type things, I snap myself into doing them, but there's still other situations where I'm just like, still have the thought, what am I doing here? I feel a little terrible. Like, again, if I'm in a conference and there's all these smart people saying things, I'm like, what am I doing here? I don't know what they're saying, but there's nothing I could do about that. And in that case, it's just like, well, look, we all have our relative advantages. There's something that I know that they don't. I don't know what that is, but we all have something. and there's a reason I'm here, and I might not know what that is, but it's okay to not know what it is. You belong where you are because you've done other things to sort of get there. And so sometimes I just have to accept, yeah, I'm not going to understand everything that's said in the room, or I'm not going to feel as accomplished as other peers in my life, for example.
And Maya, what about you? What are some of the things you do to work through it? I know you were saying, the dissertation it's like this big task. So is there something you do to keep working? Because you have to finish the dissertation. So
Right. Yeah. And like, that's the thing, sometimes like in the presentation situation, like you can't do anything about it. You have to go through it. Like I have to just write something. So when I'm experienced, when I realize that what is preventing me from acting is just fear, then I try and recognize that and say like, okay, this is not, I am deciding this is not a valid reason to not try. Like when I was applying for PhD programs, I was hemming and hawing and just, like, oh, should I not? And then I realized that the only reason I was reluctant was because I was afraid I couldn't do it. I'm like, well, I don't want that to be the reason that I don't even try, just because I'm afraid, that I might not be able to do it, or, that. And so since that point, since entering the program and really deciding I'm going to do this, I've tried to not let fear rule that. It's a constant battle. You make these decisions, you got to remake them every day. It's not like a one and done thing. But one thing that helps me is, like you said, this, a dissertation is just a huge undertaking. And so for me, what can help is breaking it down into smaller tasks. So, you have each chapter, but then even further, okay, I have this section of this chapter. Okay, in the writing section, I have the introduction. Well, what are the parts of the introduction? And if I'm really overwhelmed, starting with the smallest piece of the smallest piece and be like, okay, look, I can do a check mark. That means I can still be productive. I can still do something. I can go to the next tiny little step. And eventually, they add up and it doesn't feel as overwhelming for me. I also frequently ask for help. I think knowing when to ask for help is very good. As graduate students, we all want to be able to do it on our own, know that we're smart enough, but it's also smart to ask for help. Like everybody, even scholars have workshops to ask for feedback from other, quote, experts. So, for like academic things, talking to an advisor or other friends in my program, for some other things, talking to family, therapy, if you're comfortable seeing therapists, I know that's helped me a lot deal with some of the emotions and like we were talking about earlier, recognizing, when it's happening and then what to do about it. And then last, so when I write out my task list, doing a daily sort of reflection or gratitude practice. So even if it's just a couple lines, either in the morning or the evening, jotting down a couple things that went well the day before, or if it's in the evening earlier that day, writing positive messages to myself, anything to start out on a good note has helped too. And then you can look back at, the different things that you've done.
So sometimes just even the daily practices that help with the emotional part of imposter syndrome will help you so that when you do encounter it, you can move forward. Okay, thank you. Clarice, what about you? What are the things that you've done to help accept what you're experiencing and then, not get stuck and keep moving forward?
Yeah, I think going through that question has made me really reflect on what I've been doing so far, and I think that's a good thing. So personally for me, starting the graduate program here, especially in Hawaii, I work on Southeast Asian kind of political democracies and all that. And I have really seen how the process is very cumulative. And there's almost like a division of labor in, doing academic work. And like I think what Dr. Lasha said, for some reason, like it's very good to hear your opinions being validated by an economist. The idea that there's no opportunity cost. I mean, like you can just do it, like there is no harm to not doing it. So yes, thank you for the validation. But yeah, so I think knowing that it is a cumulative effort and, just by putting your ideas out there, it is your small but good contribution for the larger academic community, I think really helps me or motivates me to do it anyway. And kind of speaking about the contradiction again that I mentioned earlier, sometimes I feel like when you spot it, it really helps to just shake it out. And it might be a little prosaic, kind of the tip to, like get out there, like go away from your desk, like hit some tennis balls if you play tennis, or, go for a run. Like it really helps to shake it out of your system almost and come back to it with a clear mind. And so you can kind of reset that contradiction. I find that has really helped. But yeah, like what Maya said, I think to be able to know that your research is going to contribute to a cumulative kind of project, it really helps to also connect with people in your community. Like whether it's your fellow cohort mates or whether it's reaching out to a larger working group, or even just, your faculty. Sometimes people are just happy to, have coffee. Like everyone needs coffee or tea at some point of the day. So it's always good. I think connection is really something that I think will sustain me throughout my graduate studies. And yeah.
So there's a lot of great things I'm hearing. Oh, go ahead, Maya.
Yeah, I just when Claire was talking, it reminded me of a recent example of why it's good to reach out to others, and not just for help, but also for a change in perspective. So I recently decided that I did not want to go into strict academia and apply for professor jobs and things like that. And I knew this was the right decision for me, but I was still sort of feeling like, oh, but this is what everybody works for. Like, shouldn't I still be doing this? And my advisor was just like, no, it's a matching problem. Like you need to be matched with a type of job that fits you, and that that is good for you and you're good for it. And if that's not being a professor, that's fine. Just now you find the thing that is. And so I was in my head getting all down on this, and it was just like it's just matching. There's no good or bad. It's just what's the right fit. And so it just made me think that also when you reach out to others, sometimes it's to get help like on solving a specific problem, and sometimes it's just to get an outsider's perspective to realize like, oh, this isn't this big nebulous dark cloud I'm making it out to be. And for me, that encounter and him just putting it so simply was like, oh yeah, okay. So it's very helpful.
Yeah, so on that topic about asking for help, because that keeps getting repeated from everyone, I just posted in the chat box. As a panel, we came up with a list of suggestions of who you could reach out to, depending on what the imposter syndrome is related to. So of course, there's the Counseling Student and Development Center, which is free for students here on campus. Reach out to your faculty advisor or a mentor that you have. If it's the writing process you're stuck on, we have a writing center. I know some people think it's just for undergrads, but actually they do one-on-one consultations with graduate students. They are an excellent resource. So I recommend reaching out to them. If you're getting stuck with the research component, you can also contact your subject librarian. We mentioned talking to peers, family, friends, therapists. Sorry, I didn't put that one on the list, but that's definitely one that should go on there. And that kind of ties into the other point, which is it's interesting because I heard a lot of common themes of how you approached imposter syndrome, and it's very similar to how, or to the suggestions of how to maintain wellness, right? So talking, right? Positive self-talk, gratitude, right? Daily gratitude, exercise, or some kind of physical activity, getting that anxiousness or fear out, right? I think there's a lot of different ways to kind of approach it. Before we open up for just general question and answers, just kind of want to hear from each of you for any last thoughts you have about imposter syndrome and what you would want to share, anything unique that you want to point out, either from the student perspective or from the faculty perspective.
One thing I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but I think if I try to remember my thought processes a long time ago as an undergrad, as a grad, I kind of thought, okay, the harder I work and the more I learn, the more I'll escape these thoughts of imposter syndrome and not belonging. But for me, at least, they don't go away. They've never gone away, right? It's just kind of, so I've come to this belief that, it's human nature. It's kind of where you are. And then I think about big famous people. I'm like, they probably feel like they're a fraud in many ways too, So the thing I would add is it's yes, obviously working hard and toward these things that you care about will help alleviate it to some extent, but you'll always readjust the bar and still feel like, wait, what am I doing here? I don't belong. And so I've come to a point where I'm like, okay, I've kind of accepted it, but I don't let it, or I try not to let it sort of stop me from doing the research project I want to do, or accepting that I'm in a room when people are asking questions and I don't know what's going on, right? Yeah.
Clarice?
Yeah, I think one thing I might add is the fact that the whole world did go through a pandemic, and it was kind of, the entire world went through a period of kind of closing up. I mean, we were all kind of siloed into our digital squares. And, it's sometimes maybe we forget that it's completely normal to ask for help. And I guess all I'm saying is that, we can allow ourselves to be more forgiving of our situation, and take that step of reaching out, like reconnecting to someone that maybe you have lost connection with over COVID, or kind of finding out what interacting with human beings might feel like once again. I think sometimes we forget that was kind of taken away from our social interaction. And so it could be like a fun project to rekindle that social connection once again. Yeah.
Thank you, Maya.
Yeah, so I see it as a sort of specific instance of having a lack of self-esteem or lack of self-confidence. And how would you approach those, if it wasn't related to academia or school? And like you were saying, a lot of the things to do that are about wellness, are about building yourself up. One thing that's been on my mind, is also realizing that how you work best. So for me, I realized a lot of academia is you are pushing your own stuff, and you're working it can be solitary. And for me, that is not how I work best. It leads to a lot of stress, and I want to work. What I need is a situation is physically surround myself with people, but also like to work in teams and do more collaborations. And when I did a chapter with one of my friends, comparing that experience to a chapter where I was doing all of the work myself, it's night and day. And so the feelings of imposter syndrome were much stronger with when I was just working alone. So, some of it could be just knowing how you work. We're all in school. We've learned over the years what study techniques work best for us, and now it's just translating that from studying for classes into the work world equivalent. Doing research is sort of the first transition step into the work world. And so for me, it's been trying to figure out how do I do that? What is going to make me thrive in this slightly different context?
I'm so glad that the topic of creating a network of support was brought up. That's really key. During new graduate student orientation, in most of our sessions, we emphasize the importance of meeting peers, even outside of your discipline, and making connections and having that support group, because whether it's graduate school or, like you're saying, Maya, in your professional career, workplace, etc., it's really difficult to do things alone. And so having that support is really, really valuable. And that's kind of part of what we're hoping to accomplish again today, is to show you that you're not alone in what you're experiencing. So if you have a community and a support group, you can kind of talk through it and support each other as you're experiencing it. So those were the questions that we had set up for our panel, but we are happy to answer any questions from our attendees. So if you want to just put them into the Q&A, you can do that anonymously. We'll just go ahead and ask the panelists questions. Or maybe you're not sure what to ask, and that's fine. No questions from anyone? Okay. Well, so because it is a Friday afternoon, then we will just go ahead. We'll close up the panel since there aren't any questions. But yeah, so thank you so much to our panelists for speaking today and sharing about your own experiences, just really putting yourself out there, and mahalo to our attendees also for, being open to hearing what different experiences are like and how people are approaching their imposter syndrome. But everyone have a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to you joining us next time.